Hi, my name is Garrett Christopher, and this is my YouTube channel. This is Garrett's Movie Take. I have three of these channels. There's this Garrett's Movie Take. I also have Garrett's Sports Take, and then Garrett's Take, where I just talk about stuff. By the way, Garrett's Take right now, which is, I believe, my discussion number 3, I talk about the vaccine, whether you should take it or not take it, how I feel about it, my impression. Anyway, so I just saw Suicide Squad, the Suicide Squad, the one released in 2021. Now, I don't have any followers at this point, so by the time you see this, heck, there could be like 6 or 7 Suicide Squads. But I just finished watching. I started last night and finished watching the second half of it this morning. And this is the first part of August. So I wanted to talk about it. Generally on this channel, I talk about movies that I deem as the best ones out there, right? Over the last, say, 40, 50 years. But these are my choices. And some of them you would not agree with, I'm sure. And some of them from your own library I would not agree with. So there we have it. But I'm going to try and sell you on why they're great movies and why they belong in kind of this group of best movies out there for various reasons. But I wanted to talk about the Suicide Squad just because I thought it was interesting and I wanted to put it out there. Maybe some of you will check into this channel when you see the Suicide Squad. No spoilers, by the way. And I've only seen it once, so I'm not going to go through and do some major critique and talk about the CGI or about anything, microscopic in terms of myopic, in terms of like just digging in there. I'm just going to give you an overall view of what I felt when I watched it. Again, in 2 parts, starting last night. I started to fall asleep a little bit just because I was tired, and then finished it off this morning. By the way, please visit GaretChristopher.com. You'll find out more of about me and more of who I am. I'm a self-published author. I've got a few books out there, a couple of audio books on Audible. Keep doing that. And I do a weekly podcast that's available both on Spotify and Soundcloud. In any case, all right, a little tongue-tied this morning, still early yet here on the West Coast. Okay, so let me talk about it. So first of all, people will ask, first of all, I looked on Rotten Tomatoes, right? Which I don't always agree with them, but sometimes I do. So I went on there to see what it was. So Rotten Tomatoes score was like 95, 96. It was just, I don't have my glasses on. So somewhere in the 90s, right? It was just outstanding, incredible. And then I saw Metacritic was in the 70s. And then like 88% was for people who'd seen the movie, what they felt about it. So great. So definitely went into it feeling that it was going to be better than the first one. Now the first one, I feel there was one huge flaw in the first one. And I was okay with the first one up until the last 45 minutes. I felt the enemy in that movie, and not so much the kind of the idea of the enemy, but the decision, the choice, the casting for that was horrendous. It was almost as bad as the first Green Lantern and the Parallax, the presentation of Parallax. Now, you can't do much as far as casting with Parallax, but the presentation of it. Sinestro should have been the villain in Green Lantern 1. You want to draw people in. At this point, when Green Lantern came out, there was no major influx of superhero movies. It was a chance to do something special as a standalone Sinestro. And it shouldn't have been a trailer leading into Sinestro. Sinestro should have been the main villain, not Parallax. Too obscure. In this case, in the first Suicide Squad movie, I just felt the casting for the enemy was horrific. Really horrible. And just killed it for me. To where, as much as I was okay, maybe gave it a B minus for the first half, and the casting was okay. Definitely the backstories and all that. Let me talk about that for a second. So I'm an author, okay, and I've seen some authors talk about when presenting a story, let the reader kind of like tug and pull. Don't make it easy for them. Don't lay everything out there. Make it a little difficult to try and gather and allow their imaginations to kind of put things together, right? It makes it more interesting and more engaging. In the first Suicide Squad, and in a lot of movies, where you have to people don't know who certain characters are. Even Harley Quinn, people outside of the DC universe wouldn't really know who she is, right? So you have to kind of like give this background on that particular individual. Or do you? And do you have to set it up to where you spend 5, 10, 7 minutes, whatever, talking about each individual? And that's how the first half of the first Suicide Squad went, for the most part. What they're in for, what their talents are, all this kind of thing. Maybe it can happen in more creative ways than that. So that was definitely, to me, a negative in the first one. In this one, I'm watching it and I'm like, oh, here we go again, because they started off with that. Miss Waller starts to talk about these different, persons, characters in the movie, but it wasn't anywhere near the extreme that happened in the first one. It was just little snippets, and I was okay. Initially, it was just kind of like, oh God, here we go again. But it was more to the point, even though you had a lot of new characters. It was more to the point, more concise, and made more sense. But even then, and there was one scene in there with one of the characters where she talked about her father and why she was drawn to rats. And she allowed, through conversation with Idris Elba, kind of allowed that discussion to give that backlog instead of someone just narrating it to you, instead of just laying it out there. You follow me? So there are more creative ways to do that. And they did that in that particular instance, but there were still some situations where they just kind of put it out there, so be it. All right. So James Gunn took the helm. Now, I know James Gunn specifically from what? We know, and right now I'm having a brain freeze as far as where we know him from. Guardians of the Galaxy. And that's where I know him from. Well, this one, if you're a Guardians of the Galaxy fan, and you like the humor, and you like the silliness, and yet, the story, and then you've got the visual the eye candy and all that kind of thing, then great. But keep in mind, do me a favor, take Deadpool and shove it into a Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and that's what you're going to get from this Suicide Squad, because it's not kind. In fact, here's how I would describe the Suicide Squad movie: fun, aggressive, violent, outlandish, and goofy. Lots of bloodshed. I'm not going to do any spoilers here, but lots of bloodshed. Lots of heads being sawn off with different objects in different ways. And so very Deadpoolish in that respect. So, if you plan on having your 5-year-old kid sit beside you while you're watching this, you may want to think again. You may want to watch it first before you do that. Because it's not like, even though it's James Gunn, it's not a Guardians of the Galaxy movie. And yet it has a lot of, different similarities to it as far as the characters and how to put, it's not easy, I'm sure. I'm no director. So to put a lot of characters together and then give them their own slot, so where they all kind of mesh and yet they have their own personalities and that kind of a thing. So let me back up a little bit, which, by the way, this movie does this twice, and the second time it really irritates me. I am, last night, headed to get something to eat. And with my wife, and to the movies, and I thought, hey, let's check out Suicide Squad. But I knew that it was also showing on HBO Max for a limited time, and I have HBO Max. So I'm like, I could just watch it at home, but I don't. Especially a movie like this, I want to see it on the big screen. I want to hear the booming and the gunshots and all that kind of stuff. I want to hear it in a theater, right? Plus, I really love popcorn, good popcorn, which, by the way, you can't find right now out of COVID, because they can't do certain things. You can't do this and can't do that. It's not the same. Am I the only one that thinks that way? Popcorn in the theater is not the same post-COVID. Hopefully we'll get there. In any case. So we're on the way, and so we tried to go into a Chili's to eat, but the wait was too long. We were both really hungry and grumpy at the time. And so I'm like, you know what? Let's just grab something quick and go home. I got to stop right now. I'm up on time. Let's go to a part two, all right? I'm Garrett Christopher, and this is my movie take. GoPro, stop recording. GoPro, stop recording.